Hi, I'm Ian Svenonius. Welcome to Soft Focus. A talk show is a show where a host, in this case myself, is charged with the task of interviewing a subject, someone we'll see later. The host is actually chosen for their skill at conversation. The guest is chosen for two reasons: their extraordinary achievements in life and also their expertise at chat. Therefore, the conversation on a talk show is something like the Olympics of chat. In the following conversation, you're going to see a lot of techniques that the masters use: question, answer, musing, extrapolation, sarcasm, maybe some wryness. In short, ladies and gentlemen, I invite you to watch and learn. Come on. With so many fascinating performers out there, it would be unfair for us to choose favorites. Therefore, Soft Focus will rely on this lottery machine. Soft Focus will be a beacon of light, a singular democratic institution in a society rotten with fascists. All the relevant performers are in here. I can't wait to see who we end up interviewing tonight. And tonight's guest will be Genesis P-Orridge. Genesis P-Orridge. As the voice of Throbbing Gristle, Genesis P-Orridge invented industrial music. In her next group, Psychick TV, she played psychedelic 60s music that foreshadowed Britpop. Then, when Psychick TV introduced Detroit house music to the UK, Genesis spawned the acid house phenomenon. Now, after having transformed the culture, Genesis P-Orridge is transforming herself with the William Burroughs-inspired Pandrogyny. I can't wait to speak with her. Oh, hello.
Hey, look at that.
So,
I
really
made
exciting.
the lights come on.
It's nice to meet you.
Yes, it's nice to meet you too.
I wanted to ask you, actually, I know that you've been playing with Psychick TV and Throbbing Gristle, two groups that kind of are enormously influential and sort of, in a lot of ways, created the circumstance that we find ourselves in right now. I was wondering what prompted you to get back together with these groups.
Well, Throbbing Gristle, it ended in 1981 in an unresolved way, basically. We all hated each other. That's unresolved. So we all made up excuses after we finished playing, saying that the reason we really stopped was the Beatles, the Sex Pistols, both broke up in San Francisco, so we should too. And then we didn't really consider what had happened with that band, which was that it became legendary in the same way as Velvet Underground or someone. So I went off at a tangent with one member of that band, Peter Christopherson, and formed Psychick TV. And then he went off and formed Coil, and 25 years went by, more or less. And then all of a sudden I started to get lots of phone calls from writers and record labels saying, "Did you know that it's the 25th anniversary of Throbbing Gristle?" And I said, "No." And they said, "Well, you should do something about it." And I said, "But we don't speak to each other anymore." So I used a very sneaky trick, I guess. I remembered that I'd promised Cozy, the guitarist of TG, that if my dog died, I would let her know and send her a photograph of the grave. So I took a photograph of the grave of Tanith the dog and mailed it to her. And I thought, she's either going to think this is very sick or she'll write back. And she wrote back. So we basically got back together and started to jam in the studio in London. They flew me out and said, let's see what happens if you even speak. And we were put in a studio and we looked at each other for a while, and then somebody brought me a brand new bass guitar and I started to doodle. And everyone went, oh, that's a nice riff. And we ended up making an entirely new album.
So there's still all that chemistry, the chemistry still existed?
The chemistry still exists when we record or play music. The antagonism still exists as soon as we stop.
Do you think if the antagonism was resolved, would it be like?
Oh, if
it'd be less interesting, or?
I've come to the conclusion that the hatred is the key.
Yeah.
That in fact there are some bands that only work because of the tension, and then there are other bands that work because of the integration or the empathy. So TG is a band built on anguish, whilst Psychick TV is very much about joy and friendliness and happiness.
Yeah, because I wanted to talk about that song. Like you're sort of credited with creating industrial music and start spawning this movement, and then Acid House in a similar way. When I hear Psychick TV, it seems to me like maybe you're responsible for Britpop as well. Like in a way, I mean, a lot of the aesthetics and everything, it's sort of like, I'm not blaming you for that, but
well, I am from Manchester. Don't forget, I'm from Manchester.
Exactly, you're from Manchester, yeah.
And we're known as being very sarcastic people, ironic people. I guess you could say, actually, I'd never thought of that until now, but...
And I know that you collaborated with Andy Weatherall. Who, of course, was instrumental with the Screamadelica record.
And Ian Curtis was a friend of mine, too. In fact, I was the last person who actually spoke to Ian before he died. He called me up from Manchester, and he sang me one of my Throbbing Gristle songs, Weeping, off DOA. And as he sang it, because I knew it was a song I wrote about committing suicide, I realized that he was going to kill himself. So I made all these frantic phone calls to all the people I knew in Manchester, because I was living in London, and I said, someone's got to get to Ian's house. He's going to die. And I've since discovered the reason that no one took any action was that Mick Middles, a writer, was having his wedding party that night, and they were all there at the reception. So for years I was really angry at people in the Manchester scene because I thought they deliberately didn't go, but it turns out they weren't there.
Yeah. So
these messages were left on machines all over Manchester and not heard in time.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a heavy responsibility.
Did that have anything to do with the more positive aspects of Psychick TV, or?
It did, because I still can't listen to Joy Division without getting upset and crying. I very rarely play their records, but it struck me then that I'd also reached a point before splitting with TG where I'd also tried to kill myself. And Ian had said, you mustn't. You've got a contribution to make. And another friend of mine, Monty Gazaza, said, don't kill yourself. Even if you don't make any more music, stay alive out of spite. Because there's so many people who would wish you dead that if you just stay alive, you'll really piss them off.
It's revenge.
Yeah, get revenge that way. Thank you. So it's Monty that's responsible for the fact that I've continued to try and make people think a little bit.
To me, that seems to be like your whole trajectory has been, that kind of like, showing people a different modes of behavior and like living and different aesthetics, and in a sense you've been extraordinarily successful. And but now you're going farther.
You don't look at the bank account.
Yeah, but now you're going farther with pandrogyny, and I wanted to talk to you a little bit about that.
Viva la evolution is what we say. Well, what I've done with Lady J, my other half, is take our bodies and cut them up, and then what is the resulting being, which only exists because of the two of us, is the pandrogyne, or the third being. What seems to happen when you do that is that you begin to have a friendly relationship with synchronicity. The universe appears to begin to increase the odds of what you want to have happening. And that's something I can't speculate on why it happens, but it definitely has in my life. And so I haven't yet managed to have a dream that hasn't occurred. And that's kind of exciting, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that...
For example, you mentioned industrial music, or rave culture, and so on. Modern primitives, piercing and tattooing. That's why I call myself a cultural engineer. I insert concepts and different ways of doing something very simple, and it spreads like a virus until everyone's doing it and they forget when it began.
Yeah.
And we keep on returning, no matter where you go, to the fact that human beings must evolve as a species. And if we're going to be binary, male, female, right, wrong, black, white, you, me, then we're doomed. And so my concept of pandrogyny is basically positive androgyny. It's representing, symbolizing the absolute need to stop attacking what's different and stop being bigoted and hatred, and to finally create a new form of human being that does not say the human body is sacred, but says anything that's possible that makes us change is good.
So many...
Don't make me paranoid. I don't want to think that you don't want to change. It would be awful. The human body is symbolic of stasis, of inertia. And I imagine that it would be, and a lot of people would agree, that it would be great to colonize the stars, to travel into space, into the universe, find out what else is there. And to do that, we have to rethink the human body. For example, wouldn't it be great if we learned how to hibernate? So that instead of being concerned about really long journeys in space, we just injected the genes of the bear and we went to sleep until we got there. And maybe while we were there, we might as well get fur too to stay warm. There's no reason that we can't redesign ourselves.
Yeah.
And I think we're at this point where we choose. We choose to be at the mercy of our technology and allow a few insane people who are just so fundamentalist and regressive that they're dangerous to take control of that environment, or we decide to go the whole hog the other way and say nothing is sacred, everything is permitted.
Wow. That's very interesting. Yeah, no.
That's why I've chosen to deliberately distort the DNA of my body as a rebellion.
Yeah, against predestination. Something that's interesting that one of your slogans at one point, I don't know if it still is, was guaranteed to disappoint. Is guaranteed to disappoint still a slogan?
No, actually the new slogan is, well, there's two or three, but one is Viva la evolution, and the other one is pleasure is a weapon. We live in an age where it's radical to set up a zone, whether it be a gig or a piece of theatre or this, but to set up a zone where it's safe not to feel intimidated or have to feel cool or hip, where it's okay to just enjoy. and relax and feel happiness and fun. That's become radical, and that's kind of sad, but it also gives us a lot of power if we use it.
That's what I wanted to ask you about that, because you come from this generation of conceptualists, and obviously you spent your whole life, challenging bourgeois convention. And I was wondering if you think that's harder now than it used to be, or is it easier? Or?
It's easier.
I mean, what I mean is surviving in that mode, like as a marginal person. I mean, things are so expensive. Do you know what I mean? I get the feeling. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
I don't know where you shop.
I don't know.
I shopped down Myrtle Avenue in Ridgewood in Brooklyn, and these shoes were $15, and this top was $10, and the skirt was in a sale, and the tights were cheap. I mean, there's stuff around.
Yeah. I need the
You
address.
could look just like me for $50.
This is okay.
We could go change in the back now if you want.
I like sure. I know that you're interested in the occult, and I wanted to. Mel Gibson recently said that the war in Iraq was a form of human sacrifice, and do you think? I mean, the ruling class is obviously a cult. Do you think that foreign policy is a cult?
I think that that's a great. I didn't know he said that. That's really interesting, because I felt for a long time that the organized churches have continued blood sacrifice all the way through history, and people just don't notice because it's not called sacrifice in that way. It's called the sacrifice of the individual for the greater good. Just the same way the Christian church has continued with blood sacrifice since Christ.
We were talking about the government as an occult, as occultists, and I know that the Queen of England has an astrologer, and of course, the Washington Monument is 555 feet tall, and there's all this. So, do you feel like that their interest in occult is also is the same kind of like trickster, like creating a sense of what reality is for people, based on what they. I mean, is it like a war of? It's like a.
Wow, that's a really good question. I do believe that the royal family and the aristocracy in England belong to some kind of black Masonic order. The Queen's uncle is the head of all the Freemasons, and the royal family owns Stonehenge and Glastonbury Tor and all the famous pagan sites, and control who does and doesn't have access. And it was when I did an interview for English television suggesting that the royal family were involved in magical activity that the show was never aired, and I never went back for a long time.
I wanted to ask you about the AK-47 on your necklace.
Oh, yeah.
You pointed out the magical significance.
I was always attracted to it, and I got this off Lady J, but it suddenly struck me one day when I was looking through an old scrapbook that it was actually the Eye of Horus. You noticed it, right? And the Eye of Horus is the god of war, and this is the most successful weapon in the history of the human species. It's killed more people than the atomic bomb. So I thought, they are playing magic with us.
One thing, so your interest in music as ritual, community ritual, and you've been involved in all this different stuff. Do you feel that music, being so ubiquitous now, in a way that it never has been, is misused? Or it's almost overused? I read a Quentin Crisp interview, and he said, "Shut off the music. Please, someone shut off the music. I can't go anywhere, That's not exact. That's not an exact quote. That's paraphrased. But what do you think of that idea? Because I do feel that when if I go into a 7-Eleven and I'm hearing a really great song and it's like kind of really quiet, and it's like, it's really like, it upsets me.
Well, I can certainly agree. I hate all the music. There's something, one of my pet hates is restaurants with music.
Yeah.
What the hell are they doing?
Misused.
I want to talk to my friends. That's why I've gone out with them.
That's what I mean.
And there's this disco music going,
It's
blah,
not,
blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, oh.
It's not being given its proper place. And because of that, then all of a sudden all music becomes like trash.
No, what happens is recorded music becomes dubious, but live music becomes re-empowered. And I think we're at a point where just because the internet has created this virtual world, people are forgetting the idea of holding a book and looking at a painting, or being at a gig and being surprised and excited and sweaty. I think it's going to come back. The tangible world will actually come back, and the virtual world will be seen for its transparency. So I don't think it's a bad thing, because it'll polarize people. And there's nothing better than an angry minority.
Wait, we have to stop, but wait, I do want to ask you another question. I think I do have another question. Hold on a second. I think I have a really good one.
You do?
I thought I did. Oh, yeah.
I think you did fine.
Wait, I did want to ask you, Lenin had a book. He called it, What is to be Done? What do you think? What is to be done for you? Or, I mean, for the world. What is to be done? What is to be done?
What is to be done? Wow, you want a lot tonight, don't you? Huh?
Well, or we don't. We could just end it if you want.
Well, it's fairly obvious that I think that we should destroy all archetypes and stereotypes, especially stereotypes, and explore genetic engineering, cosmetic surgery, the ability to add extra functions to the human body. Basically, we should take responsibility for our own evolution and explore everything and anything that changes us from the prehistoric monkeys we are.
Well, thank you very much. This is incredibly clear.